Segment 2, Gold and Black Live, and I like to say it's three old guys getting together to talk about because it's the Friday after Thanksgiving, and we're just like you, sitting around talking about Purdue football. And we're not old guys, so that's a good thing. But
young at heart.
Young at heart. But Tom Schott, Senior Associate Athletic Director of Strategic Communications, has been around a while, to say the least. He's seen his share of bucket games in his time, and start the conversation, Tom, just about when because you didn't come here from Purdue. You grew up in St. Louis and went to college in Central Ohio. But how did you work your way into this rivalry, or what was your first taste of it, as you recall, that you said, "Boy, this is a big rivalry in football"?
I think my first memory was learning that you couldn't wear red anytime in November through about March, because Coach Katie, of course, was the one that was all over you for that. And my high school colors were red, my college colors were red, so all red's been eliminated from the wardrobe. But it didn't take long to figure out that it was a big deal, and every school has some rivalry, but this one's certainly very special, and it's been great to be a part of it. I think this will be my 29th or 30th game.
So 91 was your first?
90.
90.
So Fred Akers last year.
Oh, and that was not a memorable game.
No, but any bucket win is kind of like a bowl game. It's not bad. I mean, I don't care if it's 3-2 or 56-7. Anytime you beat Indiana, it's a great day.
What's your bucket record, Tom?
I haven't done that because I've not won or lost a game in my career.
That's right.
I can tell you that.
That's the right answer to that. I don't know what. Yeah, I was going to say, Tom Dienhart, your first bucket game growing as a kid. Do you remember what that was?
Yeah, I mean, in the '70s, I was still sometimes one of those kids that played football in that little grassy area.
Yeah.
Remember that by the locker rooms with the wadded up paper Coke cup. Honestly, the bucket games for me that still stand out occurred later into the 80s, and then even in the 90s when Tom got here. I still think of the 1992 game when Jimmy Young intercepted Trent Green late. To win that ball game was a lot of fun. Exhilarating win. Purdue was still sort of trying to build under Jim Coletto at that point. Of course, when Leon Burtonette was the coach, he didn't do a lot of things right, but he could beat Indiana.
Yeah.
I don't think he ever lost IU. I think he was 5-0 against the Hoosiers.
Well, he lost his first year.
Yep.
Did he? Okay.
Lost his first year in '82. He won in '83, '84. Yeah, he won.
Then, of course, 1986, the iconic gold jersey
Rod
game.
Woodson.
Yeah, people seem to today we're used to seeing teams having 5 and 6 uniform combinations.
Yeah.
It's no big deal. But back then, man, it was, Notre Dame had a green jersey game a couple times. Remember that? So Purdue comes out with these gold jerseys, and it was a big deal. And again, it may not seem like it to today's generation, but it really sort of supercharged what could have been a meaningless game in the Leon Burtonette era. His last game as a Boilermaker coach, he was a lame duck coach at that point, and a great way for Rod Woodson to cap, as you guys know, one of the most iconic careers anybody's ever had here in West Lafayette.
And I don't know, Tom Schott, whether it's urban legend or not, but as I recall, and I was working in athletics at that time, I think the players actually had to pay, and I don't know if they actually, I'd like to know if they ever really paid, but they probably did, had to pay $50 or something for the jerseys because they came in late or whatever, and Leon, they had them all put on, they warmed up in black jerseys, right?
Yeah, I talked to Tony Visco. He said when they came back up the ramp,
they all knew it was coming, though.
They were all laid out.
Yeah.
But not till then.
Yeah, not till then, and they were excited.
Yeah. Is that true though? I'm trying to remember if that's urban legend.
I think that's just urban legend. I don't know. I'm sure the players will tell you they had to pay for them. That's the way it works. But let me give you. This might have been in the deep dive. I don't know.
Yeah.
I know you go deep diving all the time, but Purdue needs to win tomorrow to avoid just its third losing decade.
Yeah.
Against
you did
Indiana.
Have a deep dive.
Yeah.
To me, that's mind-boggling. 1900 and 1909 and 1940 and 1949, the only 2 decades that Purdue has not at least gone 500 against Indiana. Certainly, you have to look at the last 2 years where both teams needed a win to go bowling, and the loser did not, and that had never happened before. And Purdue to win those 2 certainly are memorable. But the other 3 that stand out for me, certainly 2000 when it was kind of a foregone conclusion we were going to beat Indiana and go to the Rose Bowl, but just that domination. Montreal, I think, ran the same play about 20 times in the fourth quarter. Then the celebration on the field afterwards. But then 2004, Kyle Orton's last game when Taylor Stubblefield set the career receptions record in the NCAA, and then of course Joe Taylor's last game in 2008 when they scored on all 10 possessions, I think, or 9 in the first 10, and took a knee in the 10th. So. Just the domination under Tiller stands out, but then just some of the incredible passing performances by Breeze, Orton, Painter, the list goes on. And who would think that Kyle Ingraham has the most receiving yards ever?
Yeah, 200 yards in the 2004 game.
Tiller only lost twice, right?
Yep,
2001, and that wasn't a monsoon, I remember.
Right. And then 07 in overtime, which was the Hepner game.
Yeah,
which
if
you ever wanted to lose to, you felt like Indiana deserved that one for all it had been through.
Austin Starr, or whoever kicked the long
field
goal.
Starr.
Yeah.
Another great story, I think, Stu Holcomb's first year at Purdue, which was 47. We lose to Indiana, and he doesn't understand.
And they're really good at that time.
He doesn't understand what the big deal is, because we beat Ohio State, we beat Boston College 62-7. He thought I had a pretty good first year.
Yeah.
He's like, but if Purdue fans do not want to lose to Indiana, we will not lose to Indiana as long as I'm the coach. And he didn't. He went 8-1. He won his next 8 games against him.
It's like Jack Molenkoff.
What was his record?
Well, I think he lost in 56, and then he won, 50, they won all, but he was like,
Molenkoff was 11-2-1.
Yeah.
So, wow, 11-2. Here's one for you, Tom, or Alan, either one. What was the highest ranking each team brought into this game? Was it ever? It's been a top 25 matchup.
I know. Is IU ranked in the 40s? You've got.
You have to go back that far.
I think the only time
1979.
The only time both teams were ranked was 45.
That was the only time, 1945.
But that's a little bit of a misnomer, because 67, they only ranked 10 teams, and they would have both. Did they have IU listed as ranked at that point in 67, that game, or even?
We were ranked third, and they were not ranked.
Yeah, and they were ranked like the 11th or 12th in that game. And as a kid, now that was I was about the second grade, and I did not go to that game, but I did remember watching it listening to it. We didn't watch it, and Purdue fumbles on the 1-yard line, and to this, Bob DeMoss, rest his soul, the Purdue head coach and longtime assistant, was an assistant coach at that time, never spoke negatively about players. He would never, till his dying day, never would say publicly who missed the block that allowed forced Perry Williams to fumble on the 1-yard line. But a bitter loss, because Indiana, if Purdue was a heavy favorite that game, even though IU had kind of lucked their way through, they had just been beaten by Minnesota the week before, but they had to beat Purdue to get to the Rose Bowl, and Purdue's a 2-touchdown favorite. Game's not necessarily in control, but they'd gotten themselves back in the game, and they did the 1-yard line to win the game, and they fumble, and Indiana goes to the Rose Bowl, and they haven't been that since. So that was unbelievable game. But I remember that. I remember my first one, 1970, was the first one that I saw in person. The color of Indiana's uniforms, that cream, they really had a cream-colored uniform. Unlike now, it's pretty white. They're white and red, but Purdue in a 40-0 win in that one. But yeah, there have been some classics. I mean, Otis Armstrong's last game, 1972. I remember that as well. Yeah. In kind of a mudder game, and he runs, I think, in his last carry for Purdue, 64 yards. And he ran for 276 yards, which is still a record, right?
276.
Yeah.
Do either of you? Because I don't recall any brawls that you remember. I mean,
that's a good one. Yes.
In Ross, let me one last quick memory. No, it wasn't in Ross-Ade. It was down in Bloomington. I think it was over Thanksgiving weekend too, 1995.
Yeah, the Friday of Thanksgiving.
Mike Allstott.
Yeah, you mentioned.
Tom was at that game.
He still I think he's gained 10 more yards. So.
That game, I mean, if you go back, I'm sure it's on YouTube, the runs he had in that game.
Oh, my gosh, yes. 264?
264.
Blows me away. He said he's down. I mean, it was unbelievable. And I'll never forget watching that at my in-laws and just being agog. Oh, my God, this was unbelievable. That game, the other game in Bloomington, 1989, Fred Akers did one thing right? 1989.
Saved his job.
Purdue goes down there, beats Indiana, knocks him out of the bowl, and probably denied Anthony Thompson the Heisman Trophy all in one fell swoop.
Yeah.
What year did Joe O'Leary hit the game-winning? Was that 90?
Well, he missed in 91 down there. He missed 2 or 3 field goals and they lost. Was it him or Brad Bobich that played?
I don't think, because Coletta only beat him twice and Akers only beat him once. Purdue went 3-7 from 1987 to 96.
So O'Leary, in the 91 game, missed the field goal.
Yeah.
They had the chance
winner.
to come back, and they lost that one, I think, 24-22.
In Bloomington.
Yeah, because 2 years earlier, like you talked about, in 1989, Eric Hunter, the quarterback,
Eric Hunter.
and Purdue was not good.
No.
And an amazing to hold Anthony Thompson under 100 yards. And even that 86 game, which Anthony Thompson was just a freshman that year for Indiana. Indiana was pretty good, and
They were 6-4.
And then is it Scott Schlunt? I can't remember the name.
Dave Snell was their quarterback.
But blocks the kick. They
Yeah.
Pete Stoyanovich has a
Pete
chance
Stoyanovich.
has a 40-yard field goal to win the game, and Purdue blocks it and wins that one. I can remember because that was my duty, was to go to the visitors' locker room, and Bill Mallory, who was a class of he had been 0-11 the year before, his first year. Class of guys you'd ever find still being nice after just a very disappointing loss for Indiana. And that wasn't disappointing for Purdue. It was an unbelievable game. But I think that's I do remember the Tiller, the 2008, the bittersweet nature of that whole deal. I was so glad that Purdue just cost. And I'm drawing a blank on Indiana's coach, not Bill Lynch's job, probably, because Purdue really destroyed Indiana. Was at 62-10.
Yeah.
But I don't think Joe wanted that to happen because him and Lynch were friends. But just the nature of the whole post ceremony and getting Joe choked up, I thought was in a quintessential gray bucket game, and yet I thought that was the fact that
holding the bucket there at the end, and then directing the band,
and the fact that the crowd, you did not have a good year in 2008, but you had a great crowd for that game was always a very, very.
It was the very first Tiller bucket game in '97. I'll never forget too, because Cam Cameron was in his first year, Joe Tiller.
Yeah.
And there was a who got the better coach.
Yeah.
Purdue went down there, and they didn't beat IU. They crushed them. I think they had 56 points.
52-7 or something.
Yeah. It was unbelievable. So what about the brawls?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, now, I don't think there have been, since you've been there. There have been a couple big ones. One in 1971. Gary Danielson's Purdue's quarterback in Indiana beats
Where was it
at Bloomington.
Okay.
Now that was Purdue people will always tell you it's always all the troubles at Bloomington, and it always has something to do with Purdue's band, because they in 71. Purdue came back late in that game, but they were beaten soundly, as sound as you can be beaten when the final score, I think, was 38-35. But yeah, big brawl in that game after the game with the band. And in the 60s, again, all the games at Bloomington, there were fights every 2 years down there. When Jack Mullenkoff and I think John Pont in '65, and I don't know that that would have been before John Pont in Indiana. But yeah, so there have been some brawls, and I'm trying to think since that have there been really anything to speak of, any skirmishes on the field.
I can't think of Purdue getting in any skirmish for anybody. Can you, Tom?
No, I think there might have been a little bit of chirping going on, maybe early or mid in Tiller's era, but nothing that
I think
caused
maybe
any real
in
issues.
2003, which was a game when Purdue did not play well at all. I mean, it was right after the Ohio State game, that tough loss to Ohio State. That I think Joe Tiller and Tom would know more than I had said that was maybe his toughest loss as a head coach at Purdue, because it was a game that losing overtime, and Purdue just did not play well. And there was something that went on, but no, it's been pretty clean. And I honestly don't remember any games in Ross-Ade Stadium where there were any punches thrown or anything going on from that standpoint. But yeah, I think you go back from 1957 and all those years, for every other year for a long time, it was kind of the way it was, where there would be some kind of battle on there. I do remember I went to the game in '81 in Bloomington. About 24 degrees. There was snow all over the place, and they were just pelting, and it wasn't a big crowd, pelting the Purdue team with snowballs. I do remember that, but that didn't cause anything to go awry. That I recall, Purdue lost that game, a game that would have gone to a bowl, Jim Young's last game, as I recall. So there have been some good ones there, though, in Bloomington, and there have been some great ones. I remember, too, Mark Herman's last game, 1980. Lee Corso's son catches the touchdown with literally a minute to go. You think Herman almost had a perfect game. I think he was like 19 for 23. Plays, it comes down to a 2-point conversion. Corso's son catches the ball in the last minute, and then Mike Marks intercepts the ball at the end. I believe it was Mike that intercepted the Corso decided not to go for the tie. There were ties in those days, and he did not go for the tie. And Marks makes the interception, and Purdue wins that one. That was a memorable one. A game that I think most people thought that Purdue would win decisively, did not, but it was a very, very important
All right,
win.
quick trivia for you. Who was the coach who followed Lee Corso for 1 year?
I'll let Tom work on that one.
Sam
NFL
Wyche.
guy.
Bingo!
Yeah.
Sam White.
Sam White. That was a good game also, 83. And that was also, White was ahead of his time because he bought all these new uniforms, bought a new logo to Indiana.
Yeah, I remember
and
that,
they
yeah.
wore those, I remember talking about the 1970 cream uniforms. They had these cream colored and very crimson, very little different look to their uniform. Purdue beat them badly up to the last 5 minutes, and then Indiana got back in that game. But they Purdue won that game, I think, I don't know, 36-31 or something like that. But yeah, Sam White, and then Bill Mallory comes into.
Now, he went 0-11 in 1984, Alan.
Oh, 84, not 85.
Yeah,
That's
it was
right.
84.
And that was good because this is a good, since we all have been interns in the Purdue Athletics at one point in time. Jeff Ball, a good friend of the show, might be watching today. That was the day in '84, and Indiana comes into that game, winless, and Purdue had already clinched a bowl and didn't know exactly what bowl it was going to. And it was the games when they used to tape delay the game, so they wouldn't start them till on tape delay till 3:40, and the game was actually started 1:30 or whatever. And I remember Jeff leading it. Indiana gets ahead 14-0 in that game. He leans over and he goes, "I guess they didn't tell the team that the broadcast wasn't starting for 2 hours." But Purdue comes back and wins that game. But that was a winless Indiana team, and ended up going 0-11. But Bill Mallory came on and did. I also 96, and Tom will remember that one. It was a very difficult day just because Mallory and Coletto both lame duck coaches, both great football guys. You can say what you want about Jim Coletto. You'd be hard pressed to find more of a down to earth football guy, and Bill and I think Jim had great respect for one of the. Purdue did not play well after beating Michigan 2 weeks earlier.
9-3.
9-3, and Jim Coletto, and whether the story was he wanted his job back, I don't know if any or all of that is true. But then they come back and play not well. I mean, Purdue had a bunch of turnovers in that game.
And Joe Tiller was watching that game.
Yes, that's right. And that was
from
that's
the press
right.
box.
That's right. And that was then Jim took some exception to that, as I recall.
At what point did Coletto know he wasn't coming back?
He resigned.
Well, he resigned after the Wisconsin game.
Right.
Oh, okay.
On the plane ride coming back.
And
Then
so-
we beat Michigan.
That's right.
Well, he resigned on his radio show.
Yeah.
Can you imagine
That's
that?
crazy.
That was social media before
At
social
Brothers
media.
at the what was the name of the
Yeah.
bar that it's Brothers now, I think it is, but I can't remember what the name of the bar is in Chauncey Hill.
Yeah.
And we all
Oh,
were
it
watching
was
the-
Jake's, wasn't it? Jake's Roadhouse?
And he
No, it wasn't.
Wasn't
I-
Jake's?
No, it wasn't Jake's yet.
It was nowhere where that box pizza is
Yeah,
now,
yeah, right by
but
there.
I think, or right next to it. And it was Quincy's back in the day. But anyway, yeah, he did, like Tom said. He announced
remember that.
on the show with Joe McConnell doing his radio show, as I recall. And
We beat Michigan, and then they thought, again, urban legend.
yeah.
It was their
I think there
debate
was some
whether he
truth to
wanted to unresign, and at that point it was.
He did want to unresign.
But then, and then
That's
That's the
legend.
story, yeah.
Joe Tiller was because Joe Tiller was announced the next day during Purdue had a basketball game, I remember, against Idaho, and they announced Joe's press conference was that Sunday, but he was in the press box for that game, and
The old press box.
the old press box where you're packed in like sardines from that standpoint. So that was a very, very memorable. But then you're right, the 97 game. I thought the 98 game was a great coronation. It was my favorite cover of Gold and Black just because one of my favorites. A beautiful day. It was not much of a game. It was another 52-7 type game, but we got a great picture of, I don't know, was it Eric Haddad and somebody else singing Hail Purdue. It was just a really good picture Tom Campbell was able to get. There was a couple blowouts in 97, 98, and even in 2000. 99 game there was not easy. It took a Vinny
was a good
Sutherland
game.
punt return to win that game late for the Boilermakers.
It
But
seems like you've got the household names that always stand out, but every once in a while there's
Yeah.
Al Treat McBurse
Oh, yeah.
returned a kickoff in Bloomington that helped us win a bucket game.
And he thought he was, people thought he was a 4-star guy, and they thought he was going to, that one bit of his emergence, and kind of barely heard from him
Yeah,
since.
so it's
Yeah.
crazy how
And the
those
unlikely
things happen.
heroes.
Yeah, I remember back in the days, and again, I'm older than these guys, Chuck Keever was a guy, a walk-on guy, that played in the 73 game for Alex Agassi. Literally was kind of an Aiden O'Connell story at middle guard or linebacker. Had a bunch of tackles in that game, and Purdue was able to win that game. So this part of the show is going to go ahead.
One more trivia.
Yeah.
All right.
4 coaches at Purdue have won their first 3 bucket games.
So
Which
Brom's
obviously
gonna try
Jeff
to join
Brom
that.
can join him.
First 3.
First
Tiller.
One is obvious. The other 3, if you get them,
Oh, man.
there'll be something extra in your stocking this Christmas.
Well, you're going to have to say Noble Kaiser then.
No,
No?
Phelan?
no.
No, because he only coached a year then. So we're going way back then.
One real, 2 are pretty far
Holcomb
back.
is-
Holcomb lost his first
Right,
one, then
so he
won
did
8 in a row. Mollenkopf had a tie in there.
Yeah.
He was 2-0-1.
Noble Kaiser?
No, I said
Oh,
no.
Mal Elward,
Okay. He was not successful, but
Andy Smith back
Yeah.
1913
Hall
to
of
15.
Fame coach,
yes.
however.
But the one that surprised me, now I'm drawing a blank, it'll come to me, Alex Agassi.
Yeah.
Won his first 3
Alex
games.
Agassi.
and lost his fourth, and then after 2 weeks after beating Michigan, he loses his job after losing to
Oh.
they beat Michigan, #1 Michigan, and then they lose to Indiana at home, and that's right. So that we should be able to pull out Alex Agassi, but that's a dang good
There you
trivia
go.
question.
So,
So
Jeff
this
Brom,
conversation
go for
could go on for another couple hours, but Brian, I can tell Brian's waiting on us already. So we're going to take a short break. Tom, thank you for your time. It's
My
always
pleasure.
interesting.
Yep.
We'll try to make this an annual tradition, because Tom, none of us have anything
Should
to
be
do there.
weekly, just the Purdue sports guys.
Yeah, that's right. So it's fun to. Tom has a show too on. You guys, are you doing it? Going to do it throughout just football
Basketball?
season, or
Well, we're going to keep going as long as we can.
tell us
so.
about that
Yeah.
and the details on the Hammer. You do that. as well.
Shot Down Memory Lane with Clayton Duffy airs on Saturday mornings. Tomorrow we'll talk to Curtis Painter, speaking of great bucket games.
Yeah,
But,
he had a great one.
it's been a lot of fun. So face made for radio, so that's where I belong.
There you go. Or
Join
you
the
know,
club.
the internet works perfectly. So for all of us. All right. Well, we'll take a 2-minute break. Bring in Brian, and we'll talk Purdue, VCU, and more as we get to our last segment on Golden Black Live. Stay tuned.